Welcome. I'm Aaron Wilder, and I curated the show Unstable Language with Amosino Gallery on artsy.net. And in this conversation, I am speaking with Jean Seestadt about her work in the show. Your work is looking a lot into institutional spaces where we wait in public. And I was wondering if you could start off by telling us a little bit of how you started working with that kind of field and what it means to you.
Yeah. So forever I've kind of dealt with the ideas of like how society, since graduate school, how society controls like big emotions, big things from death to life. And then when I was pregnant and had my first child, he was born, while I was pregnant. And then when he was born with a lot of complications. So I went to a ton of specialists, and I ended up doing like portraits of waiting rooms. Started with that. I was in I think 11 different waiting rooms due to the tumor he had while I was still pregnant.
That's a lot of waiting.
It was a lot of waiting, a lot of spaces where you're being told to be in control, not to show emotion while you're being given kind of like, life-changing news. And so I just started kind of copying that and studying that and getting interested in everything from like waiting rooms in children's hospitals to fertility waiting rooms, and the ways in which we're told not to be emotional in these spaces that we're dealing with life and death. And then after that, soon after having a couple of years later, I did a death doula program and became a death doula, and then did some volunteering in hospice. So kind of similar institutional spaces dealing with like life and death.
How did you start working with it in textile form?
So I've always thought that textiles hold like, they're almost like a holy object. We have them from birth to death. They're very like a traditional women's work. They hold a lot of time in the stitches. So I've always seen them as kind of like a power object. So in this piece right here, I'm doing embroidery with waiting rooms. Also just kind of, there's always like TV on CNN or a lot of like morning shows or whatever in these waiting rooms. That's actually Oprah talking about the Democratic National Convention.
And there's that "don't be emotional" sign that you just mentioned.
Totally. It's just like I am very interested in the way that we are, like how we're controlled in these spaces. So those are like our different, waiting rooms in different spaces, along with obviously, a police officer and their dog, that kind of thing.
Is that meant to be like a photograph that you saw in the waiting room?
The police officer?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I was thinking about that like at the airport or
I see.
Or New York is so this way in which you get used to living in, I think of like a police state. There's so many cops in corners, and we're just taught to keep on moving and accept this very controlled way in which we're all supposed to be in the system, and never to like get out of line, even though we're all just like trying to get by. Yeah, I think that like that's exactly like normalized submission. I think of in like everything from obviously waiting rooms to waiting in line to walking on the street, especially here in New York. Like I'm originally from Minneapolis, and even in Chicago, there's not as much like a police presence in the day to day.
Yeah. And I switched here to your other piece that's in the show, Waiting in Circles. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how the materials of the textile relate to the overall theme of waiting and in these controlled spaces, as far as like the different types of fabric, the add-ons like these tassels. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so a lot of these like the the original composition for a lot of these I'm taking from Renaissance, like prayer books and things like that. And the flourish, a lot of those I'm like interested in the flourish of these books where they are like showing something like holy in gold, but it's still a drawing. And so
Flourish, I like that. Yeah, makes sense.
trying to figure out like the absurd, some of these are like the absurd nature of that, also making, you know, in person these are kind of like 3D objects, making, you know, a stuffy or whatever, along with like also these spaces that I find kind of disconcerting. So you know, again, all these are kind of related to women's work, kind of devotion, you know, of time, and kind of the lack of you know, value in that, like both sides of that. I think, you know, I'm so drawn to handmade objects, and again, they're often dismissed. Um, the the things I'm showing there are different waiting room chairs that I have documented, and artworks which are often very you know, intentionally boring in these waiting rooms. So anything from a landscape to like a happy baby to anything else. And then in the middle, you know, if you look at clocks and a lot of advertising, it's always 10:10. 10:10 is supposed to be like a happy time. If you'll
Oh, really?
Oh yeah.
I never knew that.
Yeah, you'll see it. Now that you see it there, you'll see 10:10 is.
Huh. Yeah. And so there's an amazing photo of you on your website where you are working with, is that a loom, I'm guessing?
Yeah. Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about your textile process? I know you work in embroidery, you've got weaving, and they're different processes.
Yeah. So I mean, everything I do always ties back to textile. So I have 2 floor looms that I work on. This actually my computer's kind of like propped on one. And then I also do like doll making, which I set up in like still lives, which I guess you'd see behind me.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, all 3 are related. The dolls, I let kind of like live out the fantasy of like the anger of a lot of these situations of waiting and being forced to control your emotions. And then the embroidery, I draw with embroidery, and I see that as kind of like a documentation of the kind of world around us. And then, you know, all of this is tied into textiles, which I really do think of as like a holy object. And so, even in, you know, it's not like I ever show the weavings I'm making, but I spent a lot of time just like making fabric because to me it's all related.
Yeah, makes sense. And so what are you working on right now, and what's coming up for you?
I'm working on an embroidery piece. I've spent the last year being part of something called the Kin House cohort, which has been really valuable. We meet once a month, and I haven't ever done a residency that's like that. It's all via Zoom. And so we have a show coming up in January, and it's run by an artist, which has also been very interesting. The questions that we've been asked and related to our work, and it's just kind of pushed me to think about combining these things. So we're getting ready for a group show in January, and I'm going to do a residency there in January as well.
Oh, great. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thanks for taking the time to talk about your work. And I want to sorry, go ahead.
Thank you so much for putting together the show. I really love being a part of it and love seeing the other artists in the show and reading about it.
Yeah. I'll just mention that the show is on Artsy through December 1st. Yeah. So look up Jean's work there.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks.